Insert theme song here because it's really, really cool, eh? Hi, everybody. I'm Scott.
And I'm Luke.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is the No Way to Hollywood podcast. Thanks for joining us.
This most certainly is the No Way to Hollywood podcast. And you're watching it. So we're glad that you're here. Hopefully you are too.
I'm not sure there is a Hollywood anymore. It might just be a desert town now. It's all this quarantine. No movies are coming out anymore.
Now
is
that
Hollywood
would be a movie.
Also finding it?
That's like a Hollywood movie about making movies without making movies because they aren't making movies anymore. Like, it's so meta. Oh.
And it's a zombie apocalypse because we know that. And despite this fun conversation, we are not trying to pitch another movie to you tonight. We are not doing this as a writer's room.
But that's going to be the title of this movie. Not tonight.
Not tonight.
Yeah.
Give me time. I'll find a way to pitch something.
Tonight we are all going to talk about a movie that we have all watched recently, and that is Minority Report. And it's interesting because we came back to this movie remembering how much we all enjoyed it previously, and coming back, we've noticed some things about this movie that now feel a little bit different than they did the first time we saw the movie. So I'd like to kind of kick us off with one of those concepts that I noticed in particular, and that is related to the tech that they used in the story.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think that bothered me even when I first saw it, but whatever. Okay, go with that. Yeah.
Thanks, Luke. I'm sure you can share your thoughts on that when we get around to it.
The tech guy has opinions about this. The tech guy has. Wow, I never saw that coming.
No. Maybe this does turn into the episode where Luke gets giddy about technology.
I get giddy about technology every time.
Oh man. It's interesting to me, and the big thing I want to talk about in terms of our starting place with this is when this movie was made, computers were a certain thing, and they handled data in a certain way. And what you see in Minority Report is still basically an upgraded version of a floppy disk where he holds videos and other sort of computer data for all his case files on a glass disk that resembles a floppy disk in computers.
Okay, and for all you youngins watching this thing, this is a floppy disk right here. This is what it looked like. It has inside of it.
Is that like a piece of cardboard with like a Post-it note on it?
Yeah, it's a piece of plastic. It's got a label on it, right?
No,
and then
it can't be.
On the back, there's this metal piece here that the computer would grab onto through these slots here, and then it would spin.
Why is it
disc on the inside? And can you get it shine? Yeah,
inside. I saw a flash. Oh, there it is.
Spun, and that had the data on it. Okay, yeah, that shiny part, right? And so that was
why
in there.
not just use the cloud?
If you wanted the file to not be deleted, there was a little tab right here that you would flip up, and then the computer wouldn't overwrite the data. So that was safe. So that's your floppy disk, and it didn't have any of those features in the movie. It was just a piece of glass. But there you go, plastic. Yeah, here you go. This is it, floppy disk. Okay, carry on, Scott.
Well, I thought at the time, it's a pretty interesting concept that they would keep that floppy disk possibility there. And they did some really cool things with optics on those floppy disks. But watching it back today, when we almost never use a disk period anymore, and we can send it to a cloud and then retrieve it in any way, shape, or form, it does make the technology in the movie feel almost outdated.
Well, almost. But it's the real issue is that they basically don't have Wi-Fi for some reason, right? Like, it's not about that it's floppy or USB. It's not even about that. It's just they don't seem to have Wi-Fi.
There is no networking. Nothing is connected. Hey, I need you to move this file from here to here. Oh, okay.
It's literally 6 feet from you.
Right. Here it is. There you go. and they use it to build tension. Like they use it to build tension, and they are doing a good job building tension. Like, hey, I need this file. Oh, okay, let me walk it over for you. So like that's good, but like, yeah, the tech, like good storytelling, but like, no.
Yeah, they didn't have Wi-Fi in the future, but they did have super cool eye surgery, robotic spiders that would do eye imprint stuff, super highways that were all remote controlled cars, and you edit now with gloves.
Yeah, which, you know, like, I don't know if you guys ever had a Connect, but like that was kind of cool. And they were talking about what they were going to do with that, and it was going to be awesome. And then they stopped making that too. So it was sort of future, and then like not.
Let me just tell you that if I had to save someone's life who was about to get murdered and I had a Connect as my interface, that person's dead. It's not my fault. I swear. It's the Connect. I can't do that. It's not going to happen. That person's dead.
There truly is something about like keyboard and mouse. Like there's a reason why it's good. But yeah. Okay. Sorry. Tech nerd. Okay. Carry on, Scott. Sorry.
What other things in Minority Report did you guys notice that you would consider outdated tech at this point?
Outdated. I mean, really, it's the entire computer interface and everything related to that.
There was a kid on a merry-go-round. I'm pretty sure those are like illegal now.
No, they just put one in the park near my house. They still have those. Yeah.
They put a merry-go-round in?
Wait.
I thought that was like illegal now.
Or did they pull it out?
Or maybe it was just people complain. I don't know. I feel like I don't see those. I mean, granted, I don't. I'm not like visiting parks all over the U.S. being like, are there merry-go-rounds? I'm not looking for them, but like,
see, I just thought that was another good story thing, right? Like, what's going on here? What's going on? You know, like this. Okay, so I will say that what bothers me about like older movies with future tech is that their cameras are always terrible. Like, oh yeah, you can do like an extruded version of the video, like the kid can pop off the background, woo, but it's like super low res and like glitchy all over the place, and there's like 5 seconds of it on your entire floppy magic disc that you have. You know, like that's it. And so I'm like, but I have a phone that shoots 4K video, and I can do like, I don't know, many hours on it, and this is the cheap one. You know, it's not the one with like infinite storage and all that. So
right, but here's the thing though, right? Like this was made in what 2002 that we figured out was when this movie came out.
Did we figure that out?
I think it was like 2002. Anyway, camcorders, cameras, phones were nowhere near where they are now, right?
Agreed.
Right, and then we all like we understand obviously this movie was made a while ago and they were trying to think of the future, but there's two things with that particular thing. One, it's a story device and it's a visual story device to kind of help you feel the desire to have some memory. Like it's old and it's not high quality, but it's this grasping at memory that you don't get to have.
Yeah,
you don't get the real thing, so you don't want it's kind of works that it's 3D, but it's really not. It's video quality on a wall, but it's really not that good of quality. Like it's all supposed to be this thing of your life sucks because you're trying to live the past and you can't do it, right? But also, I wonder if there's a secret. I wonder if there's this level where it's like we're the big film company with our real film and our real cameras and our real production quality, and them camcorders never going to get close to us. Not really. and that digital stuff, that's never really going to get to us. Not really. Let's not think about that. That's not like we don't need to shoot it like that. It would never be quite like that. They could maybe make it 3D, I guess, at some point. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's also part of the thinking on just mindset from or maybe they were thinking that might happen, but they didn't care. I mean, if I understand correctly, Steven Spielberg spent a good chunk of time trying to did some research in on how futurists at the time believed that we would be getting to in 50 years. What we'd be able to do in 50 years. And that's where a lot of this tech stuff came from. I mean, the idea of remote, like cars that drive themselves, right? And all of them drive themselves. So that's these interconnected superhighways where no one's driving and the cars are all driving themselves. So you can do passes, like everything's sort of flowing by a computer running it, so it's smoother, right? That's still a concept. It just needs an incredible amount of infrastructure to be done.
I mean, they have conference calling. I mean, that's big. That's a thing, like on the wall. That's great.
So I'm going to shift this conversation because the tech side of things, okay. But as I came back to the movie, there's a few things I picked up that I don't recall having picked up before. One, I never realized that the precogs, the three kids basically, who are these miracles that you can see the future before it happens, and the whole, like, the big thing that makes this whole entire story possible, are essentially drug babies. In the scene with the woman who helped design the program, when he goes to the gardening planter woman who kisses him, which makes no sense. I still don't think it makes any sense.
Oh, come on. It makes perfect sense.
All right. Well, I don't get it. She describes that the drug that Tom Cruise's character uses had not been refined and just hit the streets, and that drug was so potent that there's all these people who were getting hurt by it, like meth in essence, like a really advanced form of meth in a way, and that there's all these meth babies that are coming out that were damaged and hurt, and they were trying to figure out a way to save these children's lives, and that included them trying to take some drastic measures like genetic manipulation. And what ended up happening was that the vast majority of those kids died, as was the course anyway. But some of them lived, and the few of them that lived had this new ability to see the future. Except that's, having nightmares of seeing murders that were actually happening, right? And so I didn't realize that thematically there was this connection to this destructive force that creates this almost guaranteed death and disfigurement situation for a kid. And then manipulation, finally born out of all that ugliness, becomes this gift that's not wanted because it's dreaming of awful evil. It's this thematic connection of the evil that you come from gives you the ability to see other evil going on around you, even though the individual is completely innocent, right? The precogs are depicted as completely innocent individuals who haven't even had a chance to live life in such a way to even be able to sin or do anything awful because they've been drugged most of their life. So they can be the precogs, right? Like, there's this weird, really interconnected kind of thematic idea of they were born out of this drug use and awful, ugly things. They experience awful, ugly things. And in fact, they are continuously drugged. Like, there's all this drug and science and murder and all, like, it's this weird interconnection of the entire film of all those things. And that was another layer I had never picked up on because it's just lines of dialogue that never picked up on. And that's where the entire system, the entire possibility where it comes from is a destructive force.
Yeah. And then what I liked noticing this time is how much the film talks about how the official story is that the precogs are this almost, deified thing. They are, they have the wonderful life of helping stop crime. Life is great because they're here. And like, these are kids who came out damaged and lived an entire life of nothing but nightmares about murder. And that's awful, right? Like, we go from like what society does to like feel good about itself, and then like the horror that is behind all of that.
Scott, philosophically, what's the question of this movie? What are the questions posed by this movie?
I mean, definitely with the precogs, you have the question of humanity. Like, what is humanity? Is it okay for us to manipulate humanity for the betterment of larger humanity?
Well, as Tom Cruise says, I think it's easier if you just don't think of them as human.
But is that what we're supposed to do?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah. He grows as a character. He discovers that they're human.
Yes, he does. Well, that's because one of them pulls him into the pool of whatever.
On a meta level, did you realize that Tom Cruise's arc in this film was that he was a running guy, and then at the end of the movie, he couldn't run anymore? He just stopped running. He just walked around at that point. He got caught and he had to walk around. It's the anti-Tom Cruise movie where every other Tom Cruise movie he has to run the entire movie, or he has to at the end run to survive and solve everything.
Yeah.
But in this movie, he was running. He was always running to save people's lives or to save his own neck. And by the end, he just walked around and talked to a guy on a headset.
That's interesting. It's also interesting this time, right? Like his son, the running, him saying, "Oh, I want to be as fast as you," like that whole, like they plant it really early that Tom Cruise was a runner in, earlier in his life and like, good at it. And then it becomes like running physically, but also running from the law, also outrunning the past, like all that. So that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Well, when you think about the drug stuff too, we take the running theme as far as you want, right? But when we meet the character, he's actually running away from all of his problems in a way, right? He just takes drugs and tries to escape his reality all the time, trying to somehow right it. It's like he's the dual life of the character is, I have to make sure no one else goes through what I'm going through, but also I can't handle what I'm going through, so I'm running away from it, right? Like it's those two things all at the same time. So it's all about escaping his life events. And that's one of the things I think is really, really good about the movie is it's gutsy in some way, especially if you're thinking like an exec about a big blockbuster movie, but they never tell us what happened to his son. They never give us closure specifically. We understand enough to know he was kidnapped, and it's more than likely the kid's dead. That's all we know. We don't know who did it. There's no vengeance. There's no like resolution on that, because if you did, you undercut the grief and the fact that you like, and the ability to try to learn how to overcome your grief. Like that's the big thing for the character. And so to give him an answer, while it would be nice and you would want that to happen, there's a certain level where the character would be undercut if you did give an answer. You have to let him actually somehow learn to not run away from it all, even though it's horrible and there is no great answer, but instead learn how to accept it and move forward in some way. And that's the other thing. Do you guys think that arc is done well enough to get to where you are at the end, or do you think it's too because there's so much plot and precog stuff going on? Do you think there's enough character and story wise that, for instance, him and his wife have somehow learned to overcome the grief to the point where they can come back together and are having another kid? Do you think that was earned, or do you think that was just a Spielbergian happy ending? We kind of want this, so we'll just kind of shortcut to it at the end.
I mean, it makes sense to like go there, right? I don't think that I feel it, right? That like, oh, this is what did it, because I don't really see what drove them apart in the first place. So it's not really a movie about that. It's about him, running and learning to deal with stuff or something. But like, yeah, I don't see him learn to deal with things. There is something about the sight, right? Like, oh, the one-eyed man is king, and like, and that, by the way, the CG isn't great on the guy's eyes are missing, but there's all these things about being able to see, and who are you, and what can you see, and what are you able to perceive about the world, and can you see who is human and who is not, right? Like there's all this floating through it, and that one makes more sense, right? Because you go from like visiting all the people in prison and just being like, well, there they are, these bad people, to now like, whoa, these are people with agency that we've stripped from them, right? And like all that stuff. So like there's a lot of good stuff there, and that arc I think is more complete with Tom Cruise's character.
But there's a lot. I think there's a lot more plants in the movie than we even realize, because they do have several moments of even the wife saying, I left because every time I looked at him, I saw my son. And to a certain extent, the completion of the storyline for Agatha's mom, Agatha being the kind of lead telepathic person. Precog, right. The lead precog. And figuring out how someone was able to manipulate the precog to basically be able to commit murder. I mean, that's got some interesting elements of, wrapping up or completing that story, which ultimately kind of heals the main character from his own story.
And I love that we go from here's this thing that stopped murder, and the basis of it is murder. It's great.
Well, going back to the character arc for dealing with grief and such, and him and his wife, I think that, I mean, one of my favorite scenes, I think, is actually the scene that does the most work for making you believe they might get back together. And that is he's escaped to the house, and he's got the precog with him. And the precog is in the room that was his son's. And they go up there and talk to her because like, I think I got an idea about, Agatha's mom, and I think I figured it out. And he goes to talk to her about it, and she gives him that sort of vision of who their son would have been if he was still alive. And it's this sort of they were unassuming, unexpected. And I think there's this whole thing where she left him because she couldn't deal with grief, and he is doing drugs because he can't deal with grief. And neither of them are actually dealing with the grief. Now, she's dealing with it with a seemingly a healthier way than he is, right? But they are both like avoiding the thing. And that scene is the scene where they are together.
True.
And they have to go through it together. They have to admit, I miss my son so much. This just really hurts. I can't run from this in this moment. And that's the thing that changes them, right? And it's a beautiful scene. It's really well done. And it ties so many things. It's Agatha and her mom, and it's him and their son. And there's even the moment where like he tells her I love you before he gets like haloed, right? Because there's this whole thing, like that scene is so dang good. And I realize now looking back, that scene is doing so much heavy lifting, and it's so good and emotional. And that's the thing about the second half of the movie. And almost any scene after Agatha is out and you're with him and Agatha, all those scenes pay off so hard on so many different cool things. Whether it's just the fun stuff of them like avoiding the cops in the mall, and even her just asking the question of, is this now? Like, these are great little moments. The way that they do the big thing they've been building up to the entire movie, which is, are you going to murder this guy or not? What you find out, and that reversal of like, oh, this guy killed your kid, and her telling him you got a choice, like all of that stuff is so good. And then you find out what agency looks like, even though it like the inevitability of it and the agency of him all happen, like it all happens, but for different reasons than you understood or thought it was going to be, right? Proves the system doesn't work, but also proves that it does. Like it's crazy. It's really good.
And then going back to your thought about you can't give him closure, like that scene works extra hard because you expect it to be the moment of closure, and then it's not. And so that's great.
Yeah. And you I mean, it's definitely a great scene, and it's definitely the scene where the wife's character, the only change she really does in the movie is based right there. I think you see more change in, Tom Cruise's character throughout the entirety of the movie. But for her, she is this distant, aloof kind of character to all of a sudden, like, I have a reason to care, which ultimately leads her to kind of getting in the middle of it, figuring out the truth, and then ultimately rescuing her husband to bring the finality to the movie. It's an interesting scene when she's tying the bow tie of the leader of the precog stuff, who ultimately is, spoiler alert, he murdered the mom of the precog. And there's that moment when she is so close to the truth, and one little slip up allows her to discover the truth, and she just stops tying the bow tie, and she knows.
And that goes back to the theme of there's, the problem's always a human element. That's great. I think what's also good about this movie is how tension is constantly building, and that is excellent from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end. Like the tension is good. The bad guy wins and then doesn't. Like there's so many good things with all that. So that is all excellent.
You did remind me of another one of the philosophical elements of the movie, Jonathan, when you were chatting. And I kind of do want to bring it up, but it's the, if you know the future, even if you know a bad future, do you still have the ability to change it? And or what are the implications of knowing the future?
Well, and I feel like the movie it had such a fertile ground to discuss the idea of determinism, particularly with knowing your future. Where if you know your future, it's like the bad guy was a prophecy that the bad guy was going to get killed by the chosen one. So the bad guy went to the chosen one's people and murdered all of them to make sure he would never be killed by them. Guess what? Him going and murdering all those people, there was one that survived. That one's the chosen one. And it's pissed, and that guy's pissed off. It's going to come kill the bad guy, right? Like that's all like the determinism of what you did to try to stop the future made the future. In the film, I thought it was weird that the film doesn't go there. Like it kind of does and kind of doesn't, right? There's this deterministic thing where I am going to show up and this thing is going to happen. We discussed after we watched the movie that why doesn't he just like go lock himself up in a corner somewhere for the whole movie, right? Like why doesn't he just flee and say, I'm not going to do it. Fine. And the mere fact that they can prevent these things from happening suggests that they are changing the future, right? And then there's the whole thing of if you can see the future, that's the big thing with the movie. If you can see your own future, or if anyone can see the future, then they could potentially change it. But only if they see it coming, apparently. Right? And that's where I don't know how I feel. I don't know that how much I buy into that line of thinking philosophically or theoretically. But yeah, I don't know.
At the same time, I love the visual storytelling element of determinism versus human action when he rolls the ball and he's like, why'd you catch that? Well, it was going to fall, but it didn't. Right. And like versus really choice. Good. Like that is like, it's a beautiful picture really briefly, like super fast. It's like, taking a piece of paper, folding it in half and punching it with a, pen. Like that is such efficient storytelling for setting up this. You have a choice, but events happen, but you can change them with your choices. But by doing so, you have altered what was going to happen. So there is this, like, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. And ultimately that leads to at the end of the movie of them, basically letting all the people that they had arrested for the last however long this program was in place.
6 years.
6 years. I'm glad you guys remember those fine details. But it's one of those, it's like, well, yeah, you never had the chance to make the choice. And so we don't know necessarily that you were going to make the right or wrong choice. And so now you have the opportunity to make the choice.
Well, and ultimately, I would go a step further. Not that the movie pounds this message through or anything, but I would go a step further and say that there's a sort of who should have control, right? Like this whole system is ultimately a form of control, trying to stop something awful from happening, right? But it's justice is being done often in response to something awful having happened, right? You have to have justice after someone's done something wrong. That's the way the world has worked so far. That's the way the legal system has worked so far. You can try to predict things. You can maybe even stop something and show that there was intent to do something, right? These people were planning to kill this person. We have the evidence. We can stop, there is stuff like that, right? We have some of that, but the vast majority of what we do with our justice system is something bad happens. You've made your choice. Now we have to prove that you did that and decide what we're going to do with you for punishment, right? You're going to go to jail now because you did X thing. And this film says, well, what if you could stop that, right? Well, let's all stop that and make everything, better. Let's not have the murders. But right, if you don't let people make those choices, you've exerted this level of control over free will because you believe that you're never wrong, right? It's this, and that's sort of epitomized, I think, in the guy who's overhead of the whole system, right? He is so convinced of his need to control everything in a way to stop things from happening. He's so convinced of it that he will murder somebody to make it happen. He will take control at whatever length, right? And it's this interesting double-edged sword of the best intentions kind of thing. The best intention to make everything better, but to do that, I have to have control, and I will make that happen at whatever cost, right? Like it's sort of, I don't know, there's an interesting duality there.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because the current legal system is imperfect because of this, because many of my friends, a few of my friends, the ones I know about, have been in situations where they're like, I'm really in danger right now. And so they, contact the police, and the police say, well, until something actually happens, we can't do anything. Right. So like, I am in mortal danger, but since no one has yet killed me, you guys can't do anything about it. And there's good reasons for that, but that also poses weird problems for people too, like actual life and death kinds of not good situations. And so I like the fact that that's a challenge, a question, a thing that we still need to wrestle through and think about.
Very cool. Well, on that note, I think we are going to wrap up this lovely episode. And gentlemen, I'm going back to the question that I always ask at the end of our episodes, because I know how much you love it. But what can we recommend for people to watch, even as we start to be able to go out and do other things? What is a movie that you would recommend people go and watch?
Okay, so I'm going to go with North by Northwest. Yeah, the Hitchcock film. And what got me thinking about this one is the special effects. If you go and watch it, they're not perfect. They're not great at all. Like clearly special effecty type things going on in this movie, but the story is great. And so the special effects don't matter. And in Minority Report, there are aspects of like green screen stuff, especially, that do not hold up well at all. Like really bad, but the movie's still good. And so for those of you who are aspiring filmmakers, which I know this isn't the channel for that, but if you are, it's okay if your stuff is not at current maximum best, because you need to tell a good story. And what's awesome is that we have great technology now that actually allows you to do better than Minority Report for like $0, which is pretty cool. So there you go. North by Northwest.
I'm going to go ahead and just say, if you haven't watched it in a while, revisit Back to the Future. Because Back to the Future is great. And, if you... it's got its time elements too, obviously. But, yeah, that the rules of Back to the Future are funny because they are strange. But it's all fun, and it is about changing things. And I don't know. It's just a fun movie. It's on Netflix right now. You've probably already watched it 1,000 times. But you know what? If you haven't watched it in a while, go check that movie out. It's great.
Yeah, I've been trying to think of a suggestion for people that's definitely related to the some of the concepts that we see in Minority Report. And I don't it's tough because I don't know of another film that deals with some of these specific or philosophical topics in a good way, in the way that they do. And I keep coming back to a movie like Inception, or even to a certain extent, The Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars. And so I think, even though we know that we all love Star Wars, I think I want to recommend going back and watching Empire Strikes Back, and specifically like the training of Luke on Dagobah, and just some of the elements that go into that. And ultimately, Luke makes this decision to try and go and stop his training and go and save his friends, despite the fact that Yoda is like, they're gone. Stop thinking about them. You're only going to get yourself into trouble if you do this. So I think there's some of those deterministic elements, and just how philosophically you can approach this. And Star Wars isn't necessarily a movie that I approach from that philosophical concept very much, outside of a lot of what Yoda says. So go back and watch at least that, and try and get a better sense of kind of even how Star Wars talks about these issues.
if you want a movie that's truly about determinism, go ahead and watch the movie 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt and other things like that. It is a weird movie. It's Terry Gilliam. It gets very, very weird. But if you can get through it, you will have seen a story that is very much about determinism.
And if you want some clairvoyance, you've got Hercules with a one-line joke about inline plumbing, or The Oracle from The Matrix, or from 300, or lots of options.
Well, with 12 Monkeys, 12 Monkeys is one of those weird, interesting movies. And you, Jonathan, you brought up the concept of time travel. And it's possible that 12 Monkeys is one of the few movies that has such a tight closed loop issue or concept of time travel. I'm certain it's not perfect, but I'd love to explore that at some point too.
Hey, that sounds like a future episode.
Could be. It could be. On that note, thanks for joining us for this episode, and we'll catch you again next time.
I mean, that's assuming that lots of things happen, but with some semblance of certainty, yes, we will see you next time.
If we try to make this podcast happen, will we in fact make it not happen? Is that our determined fate? We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.